Hi there. My name is James Simpson. I'm from Copper Candle, and I've just recently finished the Unreal Engine Fellowship in Animation, and I want to talk you through my projects and some of the things I learned. So if you ever are interested to know what goes on in an Unreal Fellowship, you can follow this video and see what really happens. I have got a load of other training videos that I've done off the back of this fellowship. I've been sharing some of the tips and tricks that we've been learning, some of the little tools which you'll find on my YouTube channel under the same playlist as this video. But if you're finding this video, and hopefully you'll follow it along and see what it is I did to produce my project and my workflow. So let me take you straight into share my screen so that you can see the project that I created. Now, it was a very open brief. We were told that it's going to be an animation of some sort. We were going to be learning about rigging, control rigs. We're going to be learning about animations, retargeting, motion capture in particular, metahumans. Quite a lot of things that were very interesting to me to learn more about. So I have, I have actually been working on a lot of ideas that were about dancing. I wanted to bring dance into my scene, so I actually worked with my my son Ethan, who is only 7. He became the protagonist in my story. What I wanted to do was to portray a young boy who wants to dance, and there is a girl in the scene. Let me go down and show you. Ooh. And she is not so happy about there being a boy dancing in the scene. This is all about my son, who doesn't quite understand why he's the only boy in his ballet class, and it's a bit of a shame really, because he really loves his ballet. He doesn't understand why more boys don't do it, and neither do I. So the idea is that there's a girl dancing who happens to be my sister in the performance, who is a professional dancer, and she's like, "What are you doing here dancing? You shouldn't be dancing." And all the lights are off, and then when the music really cracks on, Ethan's dance character brings the whole world to life. Like the metaverse comes to life, and that is the fact that a boy is needed. You need boys and girls in the metaverse to make it truly rich and brilliant. So of course boys need to be dancing. So that was the sort of the intention. This is the scene as it ended up before I submitted my final scenes, and I've got a second skylight in a moment because I was trying to show things, so that's why I've got these error messages, so ignore those. So I created a virtual environment. I used the Elysium assets from Kitbash 3D. I love their stuff, always looks so gorgeous. And I've done a bit of work on it to try and make it a bit more jazzy. Obviously it's sort of set in the middle of nowhere. It's meant to be sort of in an infinite space. I tried to make it feel large. Of course my characters are very tiny just down here. Now originally I was going to make this the backdrop of the stage. That felt theatrically like a stage to me. That, you know, it's got this sort of views at the back here. The audience virtually would be over here. This would be the sort of the equivalent of a mosh pit, although you can't see anything from there, so it wouldn't have worked. And then I realised that it just didn't look grand enough. The scale was too small, and also these stairs weren't a nice backdrop because the camera ended up being down here. So this wasn't a good spot really for the camera. So I spun it all around, and we ended up coming from this direction, and this became the view for the scene. So I mentioned that I did some motion capture, and we were actually introduced to Move AI, which I'd heard a lot about, and I've heard mixed things about it if I'm honest. But I wanted to let me just jump back to this screen, because I'm going to share with you my iPhone. I really wanted to learn how to use this tool because we use a lot of motion capture. Now when I did the original recording of the dancing, I had Danielle and Ethan both in my studio, and they performed the dance both wearing perception neuron suits, and I checked it all, made sure it was all working in this room. We did a full calibration, it was all working fine. Went downstairs into the studio, which is the bigger space, a dance studio, and it just all stopped working, and I had to recalibrate it, but I didn't have time to recalibrate it because Danielle had a rehearsal for a show she needed to get to. So having just learned about Move AI that morning, in fact Move 1, I stuck up my iPhone, which I don't use iPhones as a phone, this is purely for demos, and just captured her while she was doing her performance in the perception neuron suit as a backup. I did a few takes, and you can sort of see the difference in quality between the two. Perception neuron wasn't doing it, unfortunately, and I'm a big believer in perception neuron, and I don't want to put you off getting one because they are fantastic. So I don't want to put you off perception neuron because they are fantastic. It is a really, really good piece of kit. It's just that you need to have the time to work with it, and it did let me down on this occasion. So this is a really interesting example where using Move 1 actually created me the same content, and I didn't need to put her in a suit, and I spent a good 2 hours preparing her, getting all the calibrations and talking through even how to do the demos. So you can see them there dancing away, and because there's 2 of them in the camera at this point, we don't really see a good quality mocap. It sort of crosses over a little bit. Ethan's dance style, as you can see, is a little bit mad, didn't come across fully, so a little bit of work was done afterwards. I had to recapture him at home, so I stuck him into the suit, and I'm going to do that so you can't see his school uniform. So he did a bit of a slower dance this time, so I had some more takes to use, and of course I can stick all these together later. And then I needed a bit more, so I actually did a little bit myself. I did a bit of clapping, so I had that really clear moment. There's a moment where he needs to stamp on a button, and I did this myself because he was a bit too fast and it didn't really come across. And I'm not a dancer at all, but I managed to make a reasonable attempt at a floss. So there we go. That's enough embarrassment for me. So that was the stuff from Move AI, and that was so useful for what came next, because I then brought that data in. When you send it up to process, ended up paying for subscription, it sends it up into the Move AI cloud, and then you get a little notification anything from 5 minutes to an hour later saying it's rendered, and you get a link that you can use with a Google Chrome extension that lets you download the Move 1 file as an FBX or anything you choose. You can do a BVH straight down from the Move 1 website. It went straight into Unreal and just worked. There was a bit of retargeting to do, so I shall go back to my share screen. So I created a folder. There was a lot of folders in my projects in the end because this is my scratch project, and we never actually got around to moving it into a cleaned up project because we were moving so quickly. And the scratch project was really just for me to do testing and all the lessons we were doing. So there was quite a lot of assets. So when I imported the asset, let's take Danielle for instance. This is the skeletal mesh that it created. Let's try and get that in there to make sure you see it correctly. So this is the skeletal mesh. It creates a epic rig for the bone structure, which is really helpful. That's a choice you get when you're doing it. You can choose a Mixamo rig instead if you wanted to. We had the animations themselves, so let's find Danielle's animation. Danielle, take 3 anim. There we go. So this is the animation as it came from Move AI, cleaned up. The only thing I would criticise about it is the fingers. But to be honest, that's still quite impressive considering that some mocap suits don't even do fingers at all. It had all the information in it. We had good foot contacts. I had to do a little bit of work on that later on. And we had a few dodgy movements with the arm. There's one point where it suddenly clicks. I think you just saw it there. There was one there. Right. So there's a bit of this where it just couldn't quite solve the movement. So that's something that needs to be fixed up. So we went through a lot of lessons where we learned how to do all this sort of fixing up an animation. We can fix these things in the animation itself in here by sort of clicking on the bones and modifying them. As I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not going to take you through those things. This is not the tutorial on how to do all of these things, but it's an explanation of what I had to do. So created an FK fix on that bone to clean up the animation itself. I then had to create a retargeting system The retargeting allows you to take this mesh and put it onto the mesh of the metahuman that I wanted. And I actually had quite a few meshes that I wanted to try to move it to because I couldn't decide on the character. So I've got the metahuman version. It's played on the Ethan character, but it is Danielle's dance. Same one. Then I also went for a cyberpunk girl. I bought this asset on the marketplace. The metahuman wasn't quite moving right for me. I wasn't really happy with it to start with, so I thought maybe I'll give this a go. And it was simply a case of rigs not working. See, there's an arm there, just disappeared. So I was going to go with this character, but in the way that the fellowship works is that you're picking up new information as you're going through the project. So you're starting to learn all about new tools that are useful to you, and in the process of trying to avoid having to use the metahuman, I learned what it was that wasn't working and fixed it. So that was quite handy. So that was the metahuman girl. Now the actual retargeting assets you can see down here, called RTG. So I've got a RTG move to cyberpunk girl. I took the move AI data. I had to create a new pose for one of the characters, the source character. So I've got the Danielle take 3 and M pose, and it just realigns things if I've got the right one. Cyberpunk girl. So she gets moved so that she's relative to the mesh that we have in the first place. So I had to create a new pose asset that mimics it, and you can actually see why the arm's not working, because the pose isn't correct. So when that arm suddenly bent backwards, it's because this wasn't in the right place. And then use that to create the retargeted assets. So you sort of select the animations that you want to change, and then export selected animations, and you get a nice animation then. It then needs to go into the level sequencer. So I can do a bit of editing on this. So Unreal's running slowly because OBS is also recording at the same time. But we did a lot of work then in the sequencer afterwards to clean it up. So I created a scene. Let's see if I can open it. Animation cleaned up. I'm just going to save these because I've been doing some other demos. And I use source control, that's why it's saying, do you want to check it out? So I took my 2 characters in here and created level sequences, one for each. This is Danielle's one. And she jumps up here because that's where she is relative to the content in the scene. And then did a lot of cleaning up. Now I did actually have another version of this that sat on the floor when I did it to make sure foot contacts were correct. But you can see I had a control rig in here and the animation, the original animation. Now this is the baked down version. There's actually another version of this which had the edits that I made, and then I bake it back out as a new animation. So LS animation prep, I believe, is it. Let's double check. No, might not be that one. It could be LS Danielle or LS Ethan cleanup. Let's just check this one. No, that's not it either. You can see where I started going a little bit all over the place. That's the one I've already got open. So I think I might have deleted it once I finished doing the work on the control rig. So the idea is that you modify the control rig in here. You can do it as an FK as opposed to an IK. FK being moving each joint individually. An IK is where you have like a puppet and you grab the joint and you move it around and the rest of the arm follows, and then you just have a pole vector that moves the arm so that you can see where it's going to be. So that creates the modifications to anything that didn't really work. So I was sort of grabbing whole chunks of keyframes, deleting them, moving them around, pressing S to re-keyframe things, and it was, you know, quite slow and time consuming. And again, just like before when I was describing the process, you can see how some of it's not really working. In the lessons, as I'm going through this and struggling with it, we have another lesson where we learn how to do additive animation, and I finally, you know, understood what it was supposed to do. You're supposed to create a new additive animation layer, which you can do on top of the control rig, an additive layer, and then you bake everything down to the control rig, and then you can have your original control rig sitting there just doing whatever it's doing, and then the new control rig, you could apply an IK or an FK, and you can start animating over the top of it. So things like feet that need to stay where they are, you could delete those out of the original control rig. But if you wanted to make an arm movement much bigger, you'd reanimate that, and it would blend between the two, the original and the new. So it was so easy once you figured that out to just go through and make loads of modifications to an existing animation. Now the other thing that came up was the button. The button is a tool. I need to go back to the other scene. We as a team, and that's the team that led our, we worked together. There's 14 of us in a group. Out of the 100 or so fellows, we'll split up into teams. And my team decided to have a button as the main central theme. So we chose a piece of music that we were recommended because it was royalty free. We had a selection to choose from. We had a voting system. When we found the music, we all said that a button would be a good way of linking all our shots together. So if you look at the entire piece that we made, you can see this button flying between, or there's always a button that's being pressed. So that's that links them all together in what is called the corpse. The corpse is what we were trying to create. Now, my button is an asset I got on the marketplace. It was a pack of buttons actually, but I wanted it to be interactive in the scene. And this is something I've never done before, and I hadn't actually learned this on the fellowship. I wanted to create the button movement. So if I just load up my master sequence, so now you can start to see things moving around. So in here I've got all of my main shots. So I've got my audio track, which is the music, so you might hear it. There you go. And it always freezes at that point because of the amount of lights that are coming on. And I've got my camera animation track, so in here is all the camera informations. Some of my assets are spawnable, so you won't see them until the thing's loaded up. So there's my camera. So until the level sequence is loaded, you won't see it. I've got my character animations, so in here I've got one each for Danielle and Ethan, and then you go inside. We use the expression a box within a box within a box quite a lot in the fellowship because everything is nested inside itself. There's a lighting track and a DMX lighting track because I use a DMX lighting system to do all of the concert lighting. And the VFX track, which is for all the particle systems. And there are a couple of spotlights which persist throughout the scene. They are linked to the characters, the main characters. They've got a constraint on them to look at the characters. For that to work properly, because the characters were in the scene, I needed the lights to be in the scene. So that's why they're the only objects that are living inside the master sequence. If I go to the animations and look at the button animation, there is a collection of things in here because this button had to fly in and get crushed. That was the principle of it, and that ended up becoming an incredibly complicated thing to do. The original button is now up here somewhere. If I press F, it should take me to it if I select it. There it is, and you can see the path it's going to take. So originally I animated to come in from this direction because I mentioned at the beginning that the camera had to spin around. Well, that ended up being a pain because I had used a physics solver to create the push on the button, and then I recorded it. So the button gets pushed by a force which I blueprinted, and then we had I used the tape recorder, which if you open up the cinematics tool here, tape recorder, and it's open somewhere on my computer. Windows, cinematics, tape recorder, there it is. So the tape recorder allows you to select a source being the actor that you're trying to record, so I'd add the button, and then you hit record, and anything you do with that, if you've selected that it should apply to, the properties would be the transform track, it would then apply or record a track, like an animation sequence for that movement. So you could do that by wiggling with your mouse. You could get a 3D mouse like one of these things, which allows you to move cameras around. You can record all these things as an animation itself. It's a really quick way to create good animations. So having done that, I've got this thing to fly in. I applied the animation as keyframes to a new version of the button. Let's get rid of the tape recorder because it thinks it's doing something. Go away. and then it won't go away. Go on. It's because I'm in here. Right, let's just close the sequencer. There we go. So the button then would have this motion, which was incredibly realistic because it was animated using a physics machine rather than me trying to animate it. And as a technical person rather than a creative person, I'm creative up here, but I'm not very good at getting my creativity down. These sort of tools are really helpful because I know what I want to happen. I want a button to fly in and spin and bounce on the floor. I couldn't animate that. I don't have that sort of skill. It's like knowing how to draw. I can't draw that well. So I used this tool to create that. So that's the button flying in, and you can sort of see it come crashing down, and you can just see it, the shadow, and it bounces. And I timed that up with that motion capture of me stamping on the button. And then you can see it gets crushed. Now to do that, you can see there's this blue box here. This blue box is a false effector. And now this is a chaos simulation. I used the chaos tool for the first time. Incredibly simple to use. I was really scared to use it, but actually it was so easy. Just got to follow a tutorial really. You get the instructions on the Epic Marketplace and just follow those step by step. It involves creating a cache collection. So I took the mesh, I went to my fracture mode up here, fractured up the button. It does it automatically, creates different compositions of shards and things that get broken and chips, and then left it as it was, as a full set, a full model, and then used this false actor to push down on it, and I recorded that completely independent of what was happening in the scene. But I then had a keyframed animation of the whole thing splitting apart. I could then apply that cache back into the scene, and I just dragged my slider around until it lined up with the foot coming down on it. So at that exact moment it sort of breaks and shatters, and then that is then baked into the button itself. And you can see that I've got the original button. It's actually got a visibility track, and it turns off at the exact moment that the cache is needed. So when it gets stood on, one button turns off and the cached version, exactly the same place, turns on, and then back to the break. Right, and the last thing I'm going to talk about very briefly is the DMX lighting. So I took the DMX pre-viz sample scene, which you'll notice DMX pre-viz is actually still the title in my my project, and I used that to apply all the fixtures. So I just stripped them all out, I moved them all around, so all the lights you can see all came from that scene. If I jump back into that sequence track, DMX pre-viz animations. Now I do have a lighting desk, it's sitting behind me. I did actually manage to get the show file made up for this, so I could operate it myself. But I decided to do it a bit differently. I reanimated everything in the sequencer. So you select a light, and it's very difficult to do because there's so many beams. I'll press G to get rid of game mode and select the light. Let's just select this one. Yeah, it'll come in as a group. There we go. If I go to F to go and see where it is. Okay, so this is. Ooh, sorry for spinning you around so quickly. So this here is one of the DMX lights. I positioned it here on the side. Let's try and get, my camera's gone really fast. There we go. Okay, and that is then spot M375. So if I go to 375, there it is, spot M375. This is the DMX data that's come in from the recording that they made. So they did a DMX live feed, record it in tape recorder, just in the same method as I explained before. And you can see here, pan, tilt, red, green, blue. So I can actually just drag these keyframes around and it changes, when the blue comes in based on keyframe animations. I know that's not as efficient as using the animations that come from the DMX console, but it meant that I didn't have to get a DMX console out. I could just take all this data and start to modify it. And you can actually create nests of different movements and sequences and put them inside each other. So that was pretty cool. So once I did all that, I was able to render it out. I used some good cinematic quality settings. I put in a cine camera with a camera crane, which was really useful. It meant that I could actually control the camera position. And then I rendered it out, and the end result is here for you to see.